Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Record Breakers podcast, where a group of friends gather together to talk about music, share music with each other, an album at a time. It's like a book club for music. It's fun. I'm Peter Rave, your man with no plan. Here with me is, of course, my team, my squad, my crew. We've got Brett.
I'm the Nug Queen.
We've got Drew.
Hi.
And we've got Patrick.
Hola.
We're here to talk about music, and the provider of the album this week is Patrick. Patrick, what do you got for us this week?
I'm bringing out the weird and some metal weird, specifically with Chelsea Wolfe and her new album, Spun.
Yeah. Interesting album, to say the least. Drew, what were your expectations coming into this album?
I didn't have really any, at all. Usually, I can make up a joke at this point about my expectations. I've never heard this name before. I've never seen this album before. I had nothing to go on with this one besides, hey, it's going to get weird. I'm like, all right, it can be all right. That's about it.
Yeah. Brett, what were your expectations coming into this album?
You know, I always listen to everything that charts on the Billboard Top 200, but no, actually, I had no fucking clue. Also, I Googled this charted. But
that amazes me, but also, good for her.
Also, wow. I bet the Record Breakers could chart if we really tried. But, no, I had no fucking clue what I was getting into. It's a lady's name, and then I Googled it, and then I saw the genre, and I was like, wait a minute, what? Wait, huh? And then I listened to the album.
Yes. There's not a lot of information because it's not a artist that any of us are familiar with, but it's definitely an interesting set of genre. Patrick, how would you describe this album musically? What would be the themes and elements that come to your attention?
So I don't think this is really easy to pigeonhole into one genre, but it is possible to pigeonhole it into about four. It's sort of gothy doom metal with a side of post metal, but also girl goth rock. I don't know. It's weird. So some years ago, the same friend who introduced me to Deaf Heaven put Chelsea Wolfe's second album, Apocalypse, on my computer, and I just I was like, oh, this is pretty cool, and I had kind of kept track, and then when her new record came out, a couple people had mentioned it being very good, so I went and listened to it. I'm like, holy shit, this is amazing. So here we are. It's very much sort of sludgy, slow doom metal, but with very, very gothy overtones and vibes, and you've got a sort of creepy, haunting soprano voice doing, in terms of the singing. So it doesn't sound like a whole lot of other stuff going on right now.
Yeah, that is true to say the least. Drew, how would you describe this album musically?
He wasn't lying when he said weird. Is how I would describe it. It's weird to me that this album can't, that there was a singular mind behind it, because it seems to go all over the place, which you usually get in weird experimental bands with a lot of different ideas from a lot of different members, and this was her, right? She's a singer-songwriter that just happens to work in a metal palette, which is cool in a way. The whole sludgy goth thing is not my bag.
What?
So
what?
Weird. I know. So that part of it, I was like, oh, okay, I get it, sort of, maybe, but definitely not. I got it, but I didn't get it, I guess. The thing to me that was the saving grace was her, right? Was the vocal. Because there was something hauntingly beautiful about her vocal in general, what I will say is I wish it was mixed a little differently, because it feels like she is, like, in the mix, she is with the guitar, and I kind of wish she was more on top of instead of like with. But besides that, like, her voice and the effects used therein were very effective. Like, to me, from like a compositional standpoint, at times, like, all of it coming together was like sort of uncomfortable in like a sort of that like dark way that you, when you make this music, you want it to be, I guess. Sort of like using a Dutch angle in the horror movie well and not bad. So like in that, it was effective, but from me, I just like, musically, I was really lost in like all of this. So
yeah, I would have imagined Drew would with his dark leathers and his boots and his chains on the weekends and hitting up them goth clubs. Maybe the ones who do the thing with that GIF and so on the internet.
Play with the invisible fushigi.
Brett, what would be the themes elements that caught your attention? How would you describe this album musically?
Musically, this is an album that is obviously not made to have radio hits. It's not something that the masses I can't hand this to my grandma and be like, listen, this is good. Look at these catchy tunes, grandma. The songs, they aren't exactly earwormy. In fact, I might call them boring at times. Like, they drone on for a long time, and sometimes, it builds a lot. There are a lot of ambient noises. There are a lot of, vocals that sound like an anime girl recorded through a cardboard tube in a warehouse. Sometimes you can kind of understand some of the vocals. A lot of times it's unintelligible. Not a lot of technicality here. You're not going to have like, the staples of metal music, like, blazing drums or a guitar that does things. It's kind of a weird thing. I've never sat down and listened to anything quite like this. Probably never will. But it's hard to describe musically because a lot of it is very dissonant and unmusical. It's more like it's a piece of art, like with some sound to it. Yes, it is. It's not exactly something that you put on when you want to go drive fast. It's not something that you're going to jump off a Marshall stack and do jump splits to. And,
I thought you were going somewhere else with that.
Yeah, this isn't really something that sounds like it was inspired by a cocaine bender either. Although I don't know. I couldn't really tell what was going on a lot of times. But as somebody
maybe more of a Quaalude bender.
Yes, somebody. Yes, but it's the genre sludge metal as a term that I was unfamiliar with. I guess that's a really good way to, like, if I were to describe what a sludge sounded musically, like that sounded like a lot of the instruments were played through a wall of sludge and muffled behind it. So it was a new taste for me. It was like eating a pickle for the first time or tasting mayonnaise.
Yeah, I knew of it, but only because I learned the bass line to Scream of the Butterfly a while back when I was a teenager. So there's my acid bath reference for the night. Welcome to that one.
Nice. There's a lot of atmospheric sounds happening on this album. It's very like moody and very sludgy. I will say, if you happen to be somebody who plays the game Dead Cells, which is in early access right now, this makes pretty good background music. I mean, not that it doesn't have a fantastic soundtrack already, but if you happen to look for an alternative soundtrack to it, there's that.
Super Mario Odyssey, improved by this album.
But yeah, The moodiness and it can tend to blend together. I would say music and this album, at least to me. But let's talk about some of the key tracks, if we can kind of pick some out. Patrick, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
I'll start out with the opening track, do the Record Breakers thing. So this was sort of alluded to, but this album is kind of all about atmosphere. And like mostly, a lot of the metal we've dealt with has been hugely speedy and technical or like very much has its roots in punk music. This is like, I just want to make creepy ass shit and sort of a metal milieu. But Spun is a really like sludgy track. Like doom metal, sludge metal is all kind of this like slow plodding sort of a thing, but this adds a whole lot more in terms of sort of texture and density in terms of how it sounds and how it gets, creepy. The song has a really cool guitar melody on the chorus. Like Brett said, this isn't the most technical guitar playing, but it is like stuff happens. It isn't just stuff happens that
Strings
isn't just
get plucked.
pure
Noise
like
comes out.
chuggas but it also really doesn't have meedly knees. It's sort of something in between.
It doesn't even have meads.
The Calling, it's a really, really simple song that kind of builds up from a, really simple descending chord progression. But you get, like, her voice is, I think, one of the stars of the show. It's kind of atypical of female singers. There's a lot of, like, she's not all about the power stuff. It's often like Drew kind of said, it's a little more buried in the mix. It isn't all about like volume and power, but she still has it when she wants it. They kind of, there's a little bit of what I describe at least sonically as a wall of sound where like there is just a lot happening at once where it all kind of gets mixed together. And I sometimes really like that. I call it satisfyingly dense. And like it happened in the same way with Death Heaven, but at, 5 times the tempo. But like that sort of, sometimes reverbed out, very, very dense sound. And then the closing track, Scrape, holy shit. That is a really, really intense song. And like the vocals are basically a full octave above 80% of the record. Gets into the high stuff. But it's a really, really like intense song, doubly so if you actually go dig up the lyrics. They're about some shit. But that like, and there's other songs on the album I really enjoy. Vex is cool, especially because it's got Aaron Turner from ISIS. ISIS, the sadly most unfortunately named post-metal band who existed before the terrorist organization. And I really wish they would come back because they make good music. Is really cool. And Twin Fawn, which does sort of the very like drastic dynamic changes that sort of remind me of the Pixies, which is kind of an odd thing to think about in a metal record, but it's it does that ability to just shift dynamic range from something relatively quiet to something loud as shit.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what will be some of the key tracks for you?
Sick yawn, bro.
That was not meant as a commentary on this record. That was more meant as a commentary on not sleeping. Spun. We'll start with Spun. Starting with feedback can be a really strong thing. We used to start concerts sometimes with a song and started with feedback. So like it's an attention grabber. Like when you grab someone's attention, you want to, in my opinion, then excite them with something. It didn't for this one. If I point to a song on this record though that the vocals I think made the most sense in the mix, it would be this one. Even though, like I said before, I would like them a little more in the forefront personally, but here it did make sense. But stylistically, I think the song was actually kind of cool. Like doing that weird ambient thing. Particle Flux. The groove on that was really cool. It was just the effects, the sludginess, like whatever. And then Scrape. The album ended like just with like to me that song was just like it trudged along and then just ended, and I was like, the album's done then. Like it was just sort of weird to end on this like whimper of a song to me.
Yeah. Brett, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Well, I misheard Drew say ambient music, and I thought about it like Snorecore. Like that's going to be my first Snorecore album, ambient music. It's going to be great. Man, this was very difficult for me to pick things out, so I sort of did a scattershot approach here. Spun. This is the example of like the droning bass and drums, and the like ridiculously reverbed out guitar that sounds like the amplifiers are behind like this fountain of honey that's just dripping in front of them, and the sound's going through the honey. So like it's kind of muffled. That had to take some work to do. In Vex, I heard some throat ripping growl harmony, which I didn't know was a thing, and I didn't. I thought that it made me smile. Like Drew was saying about Particle Flux, the fuzzed out bass tone was well crafted, fuzzed out bass tone. The usage could be argued one way or the other, like the technical way that they were using it, but the way that sounds in the mix, like it was in your face, and I that sounded great. Anybody bring a square wave to the table, I'm a fan. Offering is probably the tightest and most digestible song. It's also one of the shorter songs. It had one of those like neat 90s industrial band digital drums going on. Like it sounded like it cost a bunch of money and was the size of my desk, and it made kind of bloops and bleeps in a drum way. And I could totally hear that song being played over the credits of a B+ tier horror movie. There are a lot of sameness between, but if you start picking out, okay, this is the song that has the fuzz, or this is the song that is short, or this is the song that is not short, you could really pick things apart. But that's a pretty good mix of tracks that I can send you go do your own homework.
Yeah.
Send me back an essay.
It's hard to remember particular tracks, but I guess those will be.
Whoa, Petey, throwing some shade.
Yeah, I mean,
this was a curveball. I will fully recognize that this is something I love that is going to hit a very small, narrow audience.
As I try to mute myself so I don't snort on camera. I can't breathe right now.
Not the laugh snort, the drug snort.
More like the cold snort.
Like Rubber Johnny up in here.
Drew, let's talk about let's bring it back around the horn and talk about some conclusive thoughts. Drew, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
It's hard for me to have one because I know this is not made for me. Like this is something that is well crafted for the audience that it's going for. And that's awesome. I know that there's a lot of my music that is not great, and there would be not something for every audience, but it is well crafted for that audience. I don't dig it because when I go to like the metal sort of stuff, I look for more complicated. Like I look for more like intricate musical work, not intricate like ambient work. Like I'm not going for it for like the weird artistry. That's not where I go for that. But I can appreciate that it exists, I guess I could say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry, I was closing my closet. I didn't know you finished. Brett, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
Well, stealing from the AV Club in their review, quote, never content to go slow and heavy when it could be going slower and heavier. The bombast is overwhelming, and while there's an admirable zeal to her drive for making making almost every second as intense as possible, it begins to get numbing. This is a very, very specific album for a specific type of person, like somebody who can actually read what's on their monitor. But no, this is I will die for anyone's right to make music that I don't like. This is music that, like, it wasn't complete noise, but it was a lot of noise. Like, it wasn't made for me, and not everything is. Like, I probably never am going to listen to this album ever again, and but it didn't like hurt. It wasn't a painful experience. It was just something I didn't enjoy. And if you are into this, some of my friends are into this kind of stuff. You enjoy it. But for me, I'll take my medal with technicality and like big hair and jump splits and cocaine and like every now and then, a heroin overdose.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this very kind of samey and a little bit of a washing over you feeling, but overall it was good and atmospheric. It was well made. It's just not super memorable. I think it makes for good background music. It makes for and it makes for a cool listen. It was cool and well made. Just it didn't stick. I bounced right out of it. To borrow a term. But yeah, Patrick, what would be your conclusion on this album?
I kind of like that. Like, I will always have a spot in my head for metal. Like, it is a genre I love, but I like that it's changing. I like that new ideas are coming into it. There's nothing wrong with jump splits. I enjoy that as well. There's nothing wrong with hyper technical me metal. I love that as well. I just like that there's something else also happening. And for whatever reason, I really enjoy this record. This album is darkness. Like, it is misery and darkness and fucking, goth kid feelings, but set to music. And that's okay sometimes with me, because I am sometimes that kid. So, like, if you like metal, like, give this a shot, because it is different. And you can get into the whole weird world of, like, doom metal and drone metal and start listening to Boris and Sunno and all kinds of weird shit. But this is fun for me. Like, I like that it's something different. I like that it is a unique sound that not a whole lot of people are really doing right now, if anyone.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm like, I can't breathe. Yes, those are our thoughts on his Spun by Chelsea Wolfe. It's an album, and now we're gonna have
it's an
album.
Box quote. It's an album.
It's a website. Of course, now we get to the main event of the evening. We get to our haiku reviews, where we sum it all up in poetic form, or at least try our best. Drew, what is your haiku?
The voice was great, sure, but the music put me off. I'd prefer Earl Grey.
Brett, what would be your haiku?
Playing in drop Z. Not sure if enough echo. Sludge is a great term.
Yeah. My haiku. Moody metal tunes with plenty of doom and gloom. What was going on? And Patrick, what is your haiku?
Musical darkness, a haunting and unique voice. Metal ain't dead yet.
And yes, that concludes our thoughts on Chelsea Wolfe's His Spun, not Chelsea Spun's His Wolf.
To borrow a coin.
Yes, to borrow a coin. May I borrow a coin? You can of course find it on our Spotify playlist. Play Record Breakers, the home game. Follow along at home. Do your homework along with us. On that Spotify playlist, of course, is going to be next week's record. And the next week's record is going to be provided by Brett. Brett, what do you got for us next week?
I more of the same. We're gonna bring more sludge metal. We're gonna bring Queens of the Stone Age and their album Songs for the Deaf.
Yep.
The sludgiest.
Yes, the sludgiest and the hudgiest. You can, of course, find us all over the internet. Patrick is at the Swagger. Brett is at HBBird, HIBBITY, Drew's at Extras for X. I'm at PD Rave. The show is at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com. If you want to email us, Rebelli.net for this and other shows. Rebelli TV on YouTube and other places. Find us everywhere you find podcasts. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo.